In this video, I'm going to walk through all the steps that are necessary in order to consume a web service. The word consume in this context means to use the web service, to call the web service and to send it the appropriate information and its parameters, to receive information back from the web service formatted as a SOAP message, and then to be able to display that information somehow. The nice thing about how Visual Studio.net and the .NET framework in general work with web services is that it completely hides the complexity of dealing with web services or consuming web services from the user programmer. In other words, you will not be dealing with SOAP. You'll not be dealing with XML whenever you work with web services directly. You will be working with an object interface that represents the web service and all of the parameters and all of the return values from that web service. So again, all these things are a black box. You don't have to worry about them. It just kind of works. Since this is a walkthrough, I wanted to reiterate that we're not going to take time to explore all the individual steps or all the individual tools that we'll come across as we consume this web service. There will be literally dozens of videos that could accompany this one to explain all the intricacies of developing and using web services, and they will be detailed in subsequent lessons throughout the web services series. In this video, what we want to do is look at all the steps in general and how to create an application that can consume a web service. So we're not going to stop and explore each little topic within. So in this video, we are going to consume the Hello World web service that we created in Lesson 3101, the walkthrough for creating a web service. I'm going to create an ASP.NET Web Forms application that will call our Hello World web service and will display the message that will be returned from that web service. So we're going to begin by creating a new project. And in the new project dialog, we're going to select a name for our new project and a location. First of all, we want to select Visual Basic Projects, ASP.NET Web Application, and then we're going to name this Hello World Consumer, and you can see here that it will be placed at localhost Hello World Consumer. And that looks great, so we're going to click the OK button. And after a few moments, a ASP.NET Web Forms application will be loaded into Visual Studio.net. And after a few moments, the project has completed loading into Visual Studio.net, and by default, the Web Form Designer, webform1.asp appears. First thing I'm going to do is rename webform1.asp. I'm going to close it down. And I'm going to select rename and call it Hello World, and click off and let Solution Explorer refresh itself. I am going to select the file and select the View Designer button, which will load it into the main area, and we'll get all the space that we can here. I'm going to use the toolbox, and I'm going to drag a button, and I'm going to drag a label control onto our form. And I'll resize the label control, and I'm going to leave the names of the buttons and the label the same. Now that we've created our form, what we need to do is create a web reference to our web service, and to do that, I'm going to go to the Solution Explorer, right-click on the project file, and select Add Web Reference. And the Add Web Reference dialog appears. At the very top, you have an address bar where you can type in the exact URI for the Disco file that will describe and allow your application, in this case Visual Studio.net, to discover things about that web service. In the left-hand pane, you have a listing of some common places to look, including the UDDI directory and any web references that might be on the local web server. When you click either of these, it'll bring kind of a web-based interface here on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, you'll have a list of all the available references that are referred to over here. And then at the very bottom, there are buttons to add a reference or to cancel or to get help. In our case, we know the specific address of the disco file that describes our Hello World web service. So I'm going to type that in now. Localhost / Hello World web service / Hello World web service dot vs disco. Now, if I spelled everything right, we should see the available references. Okay, on the left-hand side, we get to see the actual discovery file with contract references to the WSDL file, which is what we need. Again, don't worry if some of this stuff doesn't make sense. We'll go through this in greater depth at a later point in time. But over here, what we can see is the actual web service, so we can view the contract or view the documentation. But since this is the exact web service that we're looking for, all we need to do is create a reference to this web service. So I'm going to refocus the window to show the lower portion of the Add Web Reference dialog. And so here you can see that there is an Add Reference button at the very bottom. We're going to select that, and within a few moments, a new item will be added to the Solution Explorer called Web References. You can see that it is added here. When we create a web reference, really what we're doing is creating a proxy, and a proxy is a set of code that encapsulates the call of the web service from the developer who's using the web service. For example, in this case, the Hello World web service that we're calling, I don't have to know how to interact with SOAP. I don't have to know how to open up an HTTP port. I don't have to know how to deserialize the SOAP message into an object, and there's a lot of things that go on within a proxy. Let's take a look just for a quick second at what makes up a web reference. As you can see, web references was added with an icon underneath it, localhost, and this will contain all the web references from that particular server. We're going to open up localhost, and we can see that there are several files. The helloworld.wsdl, which describes the web service that we're calling, the hello world web service.disco file, which tells us more information about all the files that describe it, such as the WSDL, and then a reference map file. But really what we were talking about with the proxy is generated automatically by VisualStudio.net, or actually by the .NET framework, and you really don't even have to know that it exists in order to use it. But if we select Show All Files, at the top we can see that the helloworld.wsdl now can be expanded, and you can see a new file called helloworld.vb. Now this contains the code for the proxy. If we open it up, take a look at the view code, we can see all of the code that was automatically generated for us by VisualStudio.net and the .NET framework. And again, it encapsulates all the complexity of calling a web service, the way that the location of the web service, how we actually make the connection to the web service. The serialization is all encapsulated by the .NET framework, and it is called and coordinated by this proxy class. And you can see that there's a number of interesting bits of code here. It also gives us the ability to call a web service asynchronously, which can have some huge performance benefits whenever we're dealing with web services. So let's just close this out for now and accept the fact that the proxy exists and that it was built correctly by VisualStudio.net, and we can continue on with the process of creating an application that uses that proxy, which in turn uses the web service that we're now consuming. So the next step in the process is to add the code that will actually call the web service and then display the results in the label that we have in our web form. And let me just do this. I'm going to pull these over just a little bit. So what we're going to do is put some code behind the button click event in the code behind for the hello world.aspx file. Up pops the private sub button one click event, and here's where we'll begin to add our code. Now here's where a problem that we encountered when we created the web service in lesson 3101 will come into play. What we need to do is to create an instance of our proxy, but it might be named a little something different than what we had in mind. What we'll do is web service as localhost, which is the server. And when we select the dot, we notice that the only thing available to us is service 1. Now, if you'll recall, we did not rename the class of the web service when we created it. Even though we renamed the file to Hello World, we left the class name as service 1. And therefore, the person that consumes this web service is now going to be a little bit confused, just as you might be at this moment, of why it's named service 1 instead of Hello World. And all I can say is that in the future lessons, you're going to learn more about how to name everything in your web service project correctly so that the consumers of the web service will not be confused. But be that as it may, what we do have right now is we have to select service 1, and this is our proxy that was generated for us as new localhost dot service 1. So now what we'll do is we will create a reference to O web service and call the Hello World web method. So we're going to dim s value as string, and this will hold the values that we create. Let me adjust this a little bit so you can see more, and we'll put s value equals O web service dot hello world, and it takes in a string, and we will hard code the string to learn Visual Studio.net. And then what we'll do finally is we'll take our label 1.text equals s value. And that should be it. So now what will happen is we've declared an instance of our proxy. We declared an instance of a string that will hold the return value of the call to the web services Hello World method, and we passed in learnvisualstudio.net, and then finally we are displaying the text into the label that is returned. So now all that is left to do is to compile our code behind and to check for any bugs that we might have within our application, and then to test the web form that we just created. To do this, what we're going to do is select Build, and as you'll notice, the output window will appear and let us know if we made any mistakes in the creation of our web service. Great. As you can see here near the bottom, that build 1 succeeded and no failed, and none of them were skipped. So now that we've compiled the code behind, what we need to do is actually view the web page. And to do that, I'm going to right select it and select View in Browser. And a new tab will appear in the main area. And after a few moments, after it's taken some time to compile the actual ASPX file, we will see the web form that we created ready to be called. And so here is our web page that we created in its ready state. And so what we're going to do is click the button which will invoke the web service, and after a few moments the label should change from its default text to Hello World, Learn Visual Studio.net. And that was easy enough. Just think about all the things that the .NET Framework and Visual Studio.net did for you in order to consume this web service fairly easily. All you had to do was create a reference to the web services proxy, and then you could call the method just as if you're dealing with any other object that might reside on your system. So it makes it very convenient to add web services to your project. So this concludes our lesson. Again, there were probably a lot of things that you did not understand that I did or that I was talking about, but that's okay, because in the next several lessons you're going to learn every single aspect of creating a web service, all the things that happen behind the scenes. It'll all become much clearer as you go through the lessons that follow in the 3100 series about web services. But we hope you enjoyed this video, and we appreciate it. Have a great day.